it's a real pleasure to be here with you, and particularly with these two enormously talented writers who've both come from very different backgrounds, but ended up in the same place and speaking the same language, not just that of literature, but of course of Dutch. And Benjamin, if I could start with you. So you're American, you're from Texas. What does a Texan do to end up in Holland?
Well, when I never thought about it. I'd been to the airport, and sort of, it's a big airport and you often get connecting flights there. And I never really thought about it very much until I was in my early 20s and I was living in New York, and I was working in publishing, and I met a Dutch author who came into my office one morning to meet my boss. And we're still together after 25 years. So it's more than half my life. And I ended up, as you do when you're young, you do stupid things, like move to Holland. And I moved to the Netherlands, and it was completely an unexpected turn in my life. But Spinoza, the great Dutch philosopher, says that nothing could happen except in the way that it happened. So I think I was meant to live there for some reason.
And your path was completely different. Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, India. Salam, India. It is a big pleasure to be here. I am your neighbor, and during 1,000 years, Indian people were speaking in Persian, and I am a Persian man. Salam, India. And my story is completely different than the story of my friend, colleague, Benjamin. I am the son of a family, of a cultural, rich family. My grandfather was a big poet. His name is everywhere. You can see on the streets. And another grandfather was a prime minister. And the pen was important, very important in my family, the pen and word. But my father was deaf and mute. He was not able to write, he was not able to read. And my father was a simple man. He didn't know nothing about the world. He didn't know that about the sun, about the moons, about nothing. He didn't nothing. But my father had a dream. He wanted to have a boy with 2 strong ears, and a boy, a word maker, because he couldn't, and he knew the pen is magic. Anyway, revolution in Iran, and the Ayatollahs came, everybody arrested, many people got executed. They arrested my brother, they killed my brother, they put my sister in the jail, they put another sister in the jail, and I was a lead of undergrounds organization, the same as Che Guevara and Castro, and we wanted the Shah and the American put off the country, and everybody got arrested by us. All of my comrades were killed by the king, by the Ayatollahs, and my brother got arrested, and they killed my brother. And my father, the deaf mute man, said, "Oh, I have only a son, and he has a pen," because I published 2 books at that time. And my father said, "This is a pen. This is your pen. Go out of this country." And I escaped because of my father. I escaped because of my family to save my pen. And I escaped through Kurdistan, the mountains, and I came and I reached Istanbul. At that time, I thought I was, as a silly boy, I thought that I am the only one who escaped from the country. In Istanbul, suddenly 1 million people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, everywhere. And 1.5 years, I was there as a homeless writer. I was nobody, only a pen. I had only a pen of my father. and you couldn't leave that country only if you had a fake passport. At that time, you paid $10,000, you got a fake passport, and they sent you in 10 days to America. And then $8,000 to Paris in 3 days. And $7,000 to London in 3 days, and Berlin, Scotland, everywhere. And if you didn't have any money, they sent you to the Netherlands. I had only $1,000, and they put me in a truck, and they sent me to the Netherlands. And after 3-4 days, stopped the trucks, and he had put me under this baggage in the truck, and he said, come there, here is the Netherlands, go this side, is Amsterdam. And so I reached Amsterdam with a pen from my father.
Excellent. So, I mean, you both arrived there. You're speaking Persian, Iranian, you're Farsi, you're speaking English, obviously, but both of you very quickly learn the language. And I'm just wondering about how that process then affects the way that you use and write in your own language.
Well, first of all, I feel very dishonest and sort of inferior. You're an enemy of the state.
Apparently so.
And you have this amazing story, and I just got on a KLM plane. You know.
But you know, your government's changed. You could quite easily annoy it very soon.
Well, absolutely. And I had, I'm doing my best, but you know, as I write in my book, there's 257 flights a week to the United States from Schiphol Airport. So, which I don't know how many that works out to, but every hour I can go to Schiphol and I can go home. And so I don't have an exile story. And yet, when you become a foreigner and you go live in somebody else's language, it's very alienating and it's very strange, because you realize I come to a country where everybody, and they say I do this because it's almost like saying in India, everybody speaks English. Of course, a lot of people speak English in India, but it's not true that everybody speaks English. And it's also not true in the Netherlands. And when they do speak our language, what I realized, which I found fascinating, is they're using English words, but they're speaking Dutch. They're saying Dutch things with Dutch minds and Dutch brains and Dutch ideas. And they think that Dutch celebrities are real celebrities. You know, I always thought this was funny. I was like, nobody's heard of your TV people. You know, come on. And so I realized that language can give you this very false security, because you can think, oh, well, they understand. If I say, where's the bathroom? People in Amsterdam understand where the bathroom is. But you realize the foreignness of yourself becomes much more, it's stranger because it's not immediately apparent. There's a surface familiarity. And so I learned the language really, funnily enough, from watching television with subtitles. And since I knew German and English, you know, it's about halfway between. If you have an ear for language, you can figure it out pretty easily. But I didn't realize until I really spoke Dutch well how much of a foreign language it was. I wasn't prepared for it. If I went to Bengal or somewhere, I would think, okay, this is a totally different culture, but I didn't think that. And so I made all these stupid mistakes for years. I think I still do.
How does it affect the way you write, though?
Well, it affects the way I write because English no longer is a natural thing. If you come from a language like English, it's a universal language, right? Of course, there's no such thing as a universal language. And you realize how particular it is. And you realize how many ideas are encoded in your grammar and in your language that you don't actually think about. You just say things. And, you know, there's hundreds of millions of people that speak English. So everybody understands you. And when you're forced to be in another language all day, and I talk in the grocery store, I speak Dutch. In the television, it's Dutch. In my house, it's Dutch. And you realize the particularities of English, and you realize that you're not the same person. So when I'm sure Indians, because I think Indians have more, trilingual people than any other country in the world. Indians speaking Hindi, I'm sure you know this, it's a different voice than when you're speaking English. you express yourself differently, you think differently. And so I'm always forced to think about what I'm saying in a way. I think if I had stayed in the US, I would have never really completely appreciated how strange and particular English is.
And Kader, really the same for you. How did changing your language, your writing language, change the content of your work?
When I reached Amsterdam, the Netherlands, suddenly I felt that I'm nobody, because the language was so difficult for me. And I was about 32 years old, and suddenly I was nobody. And I couldn't sleep anymore. I had bad dreams, and I thought maybe I didn't trust my own language anymore, because the ayatollahs have everything under control, you know. And I thought maybe I can try writing in Dutch, maybe. But it was so difficult. And I started teaching myself a couple of words. And at that time, there was no internet. There was only by dictionary. And I thought it is not possible to write in Dutch. But the Dutch writer has written about everything, you know. And they have written about the clouds, about the rain, about the sea, about the tomatoes, about everything. And I say, how can I write something about a tomato? Or about potato, because the Van Gogh has painted the most beautiful potato eaters, you know, the painting. And I am not able to make something more beautiful than that, you know. But I say, I will try it. When I teach myself about 150 Dutch words, I said, okay, I went to the market and I bought a potato. It was a death sentence. It was nothing for me. I missed home. I needed something to talk with it about my way home. And I say, I have to do another way. And now I wrote, I went to the market and I bought a parrot, a papagayo, a parrot. Wow. And I brought parrot home. And suddenly the parrot say, home, home, home. And I felt, oh, this is the sentence, the words standing up. That was my words. And I started writing in Dutch with thousands of mistakes. But suddenly something was happened. When my brother was killed, we were not allowed to bury them in a normal way. And we put it in the mountains. And I was looking for a grave for my brother. And suddenly I thought, maybe the Dutch literature, I can bury him in the ground of the Dutch literature. I started writing. And I made a beautiful garden. And I put my brother in it, you know. And suddenly, I had the feeling, I felt like an astronaut. I had the feeling of an astronaut who was making a walk in the sky. When I was writing in Dutch, I was free. I went up. I went down. I went the left side, right. Oh, I am free. And it is Dutch to me. I can write in Dutch. I can write beautiful books in Dutch. But my own Dutch. After 3 years, when my first Dutch book, published my first Dutch book, it was not a masterpieces, but everybody say, wow, what a wonderful book. What has happened? And they gave me many prizes. For what? For my Dutch. It is a beautiful Dutch. It was Kader Abdollah's Dutch. I had written a beautiful book in a beautiful Dutch language. And then second book, third book, fifth book, 10th book, 20 book, 30 books. I have written 30 books in Dutch language, but It is my Dutch. It is immigration. It is immigration. You escape from your country and you have to change your language. I wrote, not for myself. I wrote for everything I had lost. I was lost in my country. And Europe changed. Millions of immigrants are now present in Europe. And millions of immigrants are coming to Europe. And there is a voice, an important voice. And Europe is, we are making a new Europe. We need new architects. We need new architects, a new voice. And this is the voice of change. I'm not a proud man to talk about myself. I'm saying that is the voice of a changing, a new Europe. Writing is Dutch, making a new country.
That's something that a lot of people are pushing back against, though, because what we're seeing across Europe and in the Netherlands is the rise of the right. And I wonder how that affects you and you working there.
Well, I think it's important to know, we in the Netherlands have about the most right-wing government in Europe, openly racist government, which is not, even in Trump, for example, is not actually, people say it's racist, but it's not racist in the sense that in Holland, they're trying to ban the Quran, the most powerful man in the country. And it's really been, since I got there, there's been a Muslim panic, since the early 2000s. So I think all of us here, you, me, we like this idea of a diverse country and of all these new voices and of new people coming in, and the food is certainly better than it used to be, because Dutch food, Dutch are good at paintings, they're not so good at cooking. Every country has its talents, and that's not really the one they have. So we like this, we welcome this, we find this exciting and stimulating, but there's a real panic, and it's been going on now for more than 20 years. There were some assassinations in the early part of the century, and we've seen, as in Britain, as in France, as in Italy, as in the United States, as in India, we've seen a very steady rise of the right wing, and it's I think for me, it gives me more of a commitment to cosmopolitanism, to the vision of different people writing in different languages and having different lives. But not everybody feels that way. And I also understand why they don't. We were just talking earlier about in Amsterdam now, when you walk into a shop, 50% of the time, they'll speak to you in English. And for a Dutch person who might understand but not feel comfortable, they're in their own city, in their own country, and people don't speak Dutch. And so that's very alienating to certain people, and I do understand that. And I hope the panic will subside eventually. What do you think? Will it ever subside?
I mean, Kader was talking about the rich cultural heritage in the Netherlands, talking about the art, and of course, that's what you've written about. And in your book, what you're also trying to do is answer a number of, I guess, existential questions, which feed into exactly what you've been talking about. What were the aims when you came to write your Upside Down World?
Well, this is a book that I wrote over 20 years. And it was I didn't know what to do. It's a different experience than you, because I was not in exile, and I always was very grateful for that, for the knowledge that I could go home whenever I want. This is a luxury that so many refugees don't have. But I wanted a way into this culture because it looks very transparent. It's a very open, it's a pretty easy place to live. But I didn't understand it. And the more I understood that I didn't understand, the more I was fascinated by the artists and their questions, because I was a young person. I was trying to be a writer. As we say in America, I didn't know my ass from my elbow. I had no idea what I was doing. And I saw these artists that the great cultural achievement of the Dutch is their painters, their visual arts. And I saw, the more I got to know them, the more I realized that they were asking the same questions that I was. And I saw that these questions people have always struggled with this. Anyone who tries to paint a painting or write a song or write a book, they all struggle with the same insecurities, the same doubts, the same feeling of, like, who cares about my poem? You know, here I am staying up all night sweating over this poem that nobody cares about. You know, nobody cares about my little song or my book. And you have to overcome that in yourself, and you have to find enough self-belief. And I saw this in these painters, many of whom died quite young. And I thought, you know, what does it mean to succeed as an artist? What does it mean to fail? What does it mean to, you know, is art worth dying for? Can you make a grave? This is a great example. Is a book a grave? You know, and you can see all these questions coming back that actually, doesn't matter really what your background is, but people were always asking these questions. So I found that very stimulating.
And what questions are you asking in your latest books? Give us a sense of how Kader's Dutch asks those questions.
Kijk, Iran, Persian culture. It is a rich culture, rich literature. We have about 3,000 years about poetry. There are two different countries, two different kind of literature. In the Dutch poetry, the writers write about, there is a beautiful poem about a potato, and the writers write about bicycle, and we have about 3,000 years Persian poetry, but we don't have any big master in the Persian literature who has written a poetry about potato and such things, you know. And when I started writing in Dutch, I told you, when my first book was published, everybody, it is wonderful, but I didn't know why it was wonderful, because I have put many Persian language, music, and stories in my books. When I was writing in Dutch, I didn't know that the Dutch was busy to change me as a writer. And the Dutch language has made a new man, a new Kader Abdolah of mine, you know. And now I feel I am more Kader Abdolah than before, when I left my country. But the important thing was, when I left my country, when I escaped from my country, I knew why I was escaped. But I didn't know what I could get back in the state. I didn't know that, you know. But now I know it. I escaped from my country to meet you, and it is a wonderful meeting. And I didn't know that the Dutch literature, Dutch words, that it's so powerful and important was Dutch language. I wrote in Dutch with thousands of mistakes, and I asked everybody, please, why these sentences, who can you help me to correct these sentences? And I wrote books, and the Dutch literature sent me everywhere on the world, in America, in Australia, in India. What is Dutch to me? Dutch is the Dutch language. He changed me, he changed my literature, and he changed my look, the way I look to the world.
And how easy is it for you to live in this society that has given you so much in terms of literature, but which also, as Ben says, has this very right-wing aspect to it? How hard is it being an Iranian man in the Netherlands?
I'm not anymore an Iranian man in the Dutch literature. I love my country. I love the Persian literature. I love the Persian culture. But I am not a Persian writer anymore. I am not allowed to be, because a real Persian writer is not allowed to write at this time in Iran. But I have a word of freedom to write. I cannot say I am a Persian writer. And at the same time, I am not a Dutch writer. Who am I? I am Kader Abdolah, more than beautiful when I was.
And even your name, Kader Abdolah, those are names of two of your
They are
friends?
the names of two comrades of mine. Kader was executed during the regime of the Shah, and Abdullah was executed during the regime of the Ayatollahs. When I published my first book, I couldn't put my own name on the cover of the book. I put their names beside together, and since that time, I am Kader Abdolah. It is more powerful than before. And one thing is important to say to you. When I was in my own country, and when I used to write in Persian, I ask always myself, God, how can I write a good book? What can I write about? What all of the Persian masters has written about everything, about love, about war, about loss, about everything. They didn't have left anything for me. How can I write? What about can I write? And now I have written about the rain. I have written about the potatoes. I have written about the bicycles. I have written about the beautiful Dutch women. I have written about everything that nobody in 3,000 years Persian literature has written about it.
Thank you. Kader Abdolah, great name, as is Benjamin Moser, a name that's very well known since you won the Pulitzer. And I wonder then how difficult it is to carry on working after you've had, almost I'd say, the ultimate accolade.
I recommend it. I think it was great. I won the Pulitzer Prize right after I was in Jaipur in 2020. That was in January when I was here. And then I won this prize in May. So what happens between January 2020 and May 2020? Well, you know, I was in Delhi at the hotel reading the Hindustan Times, and I saw this little article. It said, novel coronavirus found in China. And I thought, oh, okay. And then I ate my banana and I had my coffee and I went to visit the Hanuman's tomb or whatever I did. And I had no idea that 2 weeks later, my whole life was going to be shut down. And I got locked into my house, as we all did. And I thought, well, you know, at least I saw the Taj Mahal, you know, before I die. And then it was such a hard time for all of us. And in May, I got this prize. And it was a huge thing because, as I said, you know, for all artists and all writers, you know, we're all trying to do something. We're all failing in a certain way. You know, I mean, this is funny what you're saying about potatoes, because this is the ultimate Dutch subject, you know. And actually, it's not just a Dutch subject for writers, but for the painters, they painted regular life. They painted the bicycle on the street and the dog and the woman with the child. This is what their real innovation was. And so, and the great Dutch painters actually emerged at the same time as the first great European novelists. You know, so Don Quixote is about a generation before Rembrandt. And I thought, okay, well, I may not have done everything I wanted to do, but at least, you know, I've achieved something. And I was so lonely. And I think like so many of us, it was just a hard time. And so it would have been very welcome at any time. Obviously, it would have been. But at that time, it was fantastic. And it kept me going.
Listen, we are going to turn to you, the audience now. I'm afraid I'm going to be terribly strict and say you really must keep the questions to questions, not statements, and very, very short.
1 minute.
Yep.
1 minute. About India, we are neighbors. And I told you, about 1,000 years, men was speaking Persian in the rich people, rich Indian people are speaking Dutch. And in the Persian literature, we have masterpieces about India. And I want, and there are 1,000 words the same in Persian as in India, in Hindu. I want to say one of those poems, very short.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You know about canned soccer pieces and about, yeah, okay. شکن شوند همه توتیان هند زین قند پارسی که به بنگاله می رود. Here about the parrots, Indian parrots enjoy of the Persian canned soccer cloches, but the parrots are the Indian poets, and soccer cans is Persian language. شکر شکن شوند همه توتیان هند زین قند پارسی که به بنگاله می رود. We love India. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, do we have some questions from the audience? We've got a couple. We've got some microphones. Yep, we've got some mics. Let's take from the front here, first of all. You, yeah. Just wait for the microphone to come. Second girl along.
Good morning. So my question to you is, what themes in Dutch literature resonate most with you, and how do you balance tradition and modernity in your work, making Dutch stories relatable globally while you have shaped your storytelling?
Well, in my new book, which is about Dutch painters, it's a very particular country. I mean, every country is particular. And Holland, it's funny, it's very different from Belgium, which is almost, if you come from Rajasthan, it looks exactly the same. But the longer you're there, the more you see the differences, and the more you see that these particularities emerge from a specific way of looking at things. And so what I think that Holland gave me, America is a very sprawling, chaotic country. And Holland, I think, just to take over it gave me potatoes. You know, it lets you look at things that are smaller and actually appreciate. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Dutch literature is young, you know, and the country is small literature. And Persian literature is okay. But when I started writing in Dutch, I discovered that it is one of the most beautiful language on earth, because they are very zandig. They are very
like they don't use much. They're
very simple.
Simple, yeah.
Powerful,
clean.
And I told you the title, one of the important Dutch poetry, the title is Everything on the Bike. Simple.
Let's have another question. Yeah, just here in the pink. Thank you.
Hi. So I live in the Netherlands, and I've come here for the JLF and for 3 weddings, and I've been living there for 2 years. And I went to the Netherlands when I was 26. I don't speak a word of Dutch. I'm just imagining, if you were 22 and coming to the Netherlands now, would you get the same solace in the language that you found whenever you came back then?
Oh, I think so. I think that, you know, this is what as an English speaker, you know that it's very easy to live with no Dutch. And I think this is a big mistake. I think if you live in any country, you know, in India, you can live with only English, and a lot of people do. They come here and they live their whole careers and they never learn Hindi or anything. And I think that now I've become very skeptical about globalization. I think it's a bad idea in many ways. And then especially, I think that it tends to create a false surface, which is very easy. It's like the duty-free shop. You know, you go from Rajasthan to Dubai to Sao Paulo, you have exactly the same face cream, you know? But that doesn't mean that Sao Paulo is the same as Jaipur, you know? So I think that, yeah, I mean, I encourage, learn Dutch. It's a great language, as Kader says, yeah.
He was in love when he came to the Netherlands. And if you are in love, You can teach yourself Dutch language. He speaks very well. He speaks very well. Otherwise, you have to be crazy. Is this my sample? You have to be crazy because you put your life, you have to put your life in the Dutch language, and then you bike about 10 kilometers and nobody understands you. Or in love or crazy. There is no another way.
Or both.
Or both.
Or both.
Do we have another question just there? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I am going to make a statement, and to quote my father, is to say, Nederlands is helemaal niet moeilijk, alle kinderen spreken het. The question I want to ask you, it is as somebody who moved away from the Netherlands, it's very strange to listen to a debate about the Dutch language without any Dutch spoken here. I wish you had, quoted some poems. The question I have for you, maybe more for Benjamin though, to Kader, is that the way the rest of the world looks at Dutch culture to somebody who grew up in the polders in the Netherlands is a complete myth.
This is what?
Myth. Right, I grew up with Maarten het Hart, for example,
Yeah.
right? And that's a deep Calvinist culture. And I really, perhaps you can, I will read your book, I promise. It was a great presentation. I'd really want you to, perhaps you can reflect on how much the rest of the world has just created the myth of what the Netherlands is. It doesn't reflect, what
The myth, I think the myth of every country has a myth.
Right.
Every country has a representation. I mean, what country is more mythical than India, It is not the actual reality of getting up in the morning and making coffee and taking your children to school. I mean, this is life, and it's not mythical. But at the same time, I think it's nice. My book is about living in the myth of Holland. Because when I came to Holland, as we were saying, there was this very ugly nationalistic right-wing move. This is 25 years ago. And also, I think when you come to, this is my second trip to India. The first time I came to India, it looks very different. It's so much more, and then you get used to things. And wherever you go, it's quite easy to get used to things to the point where you don't really care about the myth. You don't care about the legend. All you care about is you need to go to the grocery store, or you need to fix your air conditioning. And this is so boring. So I liked living in the myth, and I liked living in the world of the great cultural figures of this country. And I don't care about the politicians. I don't care about the sports. I said I don't care about the celebrities, which for me are not real celebrities. I live with Rembrandt and Vermeer, and that is fine. And it's not real, but it's also not fake. Rembrandt and Vermeer are also real.
Yeah, he's okay. You okay?
Yeah. Listen, we've got one more question, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to close.
The lady.
Do you ever feel that you have lost a part of yourself when you changed your language? What did you do to always preserve that one part of your past?
What do you feel like you lost a part of yourself when you lost your language?
No, absolutely not. I got back a big of my part of my identity when I started writing in Dutch. In my own country, I say it to everybody, in the young people, if you live only in your own village, in your own city, in your own country, you are not able to meet yourself. You see only a part of yourself, But if you live with love, if you leave your country and to go to another country, it is a big opportunity to meet you, to meet yourself. I didn't know. In Iran, I was a writer. Okay, good for you, Kader Abdolah. But I didn't know myself. But I needed the Dutch language. I needed those Dutch people to be able to see myself.
And if you can't travel physically to another country to meet yourself, as Kader says, what you can do, of course, is read the literature of those countries So I'm pleased to say that both authors will be signing their books. You can pick them up. I'd also, just before you applaud them, I would just like a little bit of applause, please, for Vivek, who's the venue manager, but mostly for the volunteers, not only just here, the people in the turquoise jackets, but all around the site. These are young people who are doing it for nothing, who are so driven by the love of reading, by the love of trying to find themselves and be out there in the world and support writers like you and make sure that everybody here is safe and has a great time. So thank you to the volunteers, but mostly thanks to the big authors.
Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you. Thank you very much.